Okay, I'm going to make a rocket animation, and it's going to use guide paths to follow a line that you've previously specified, and it also aligns itself along the path that is there. And if I show you briefly what it looks like, you can see that the rocket itself is getting a little blast coming out of the back, and they're moving in and out. Now that's a small movie up here called Blast. If I double click on that, you can see that it is simply I've just used a classic tween, but it has got a number of things. For example, it goes back into place and the Y position stays identical. I'll show you how to do that. And the rocket itself is a graphic that does include the Blast movie clip, and it's made of a number of layers, and each of those layers constitutes a different part of the rocket. For example, layer 3 is one of the fins, layer 5 is one of the fins, layer 6 is the blast, which I could probably rename that so you can see that that's the blast, and layer 4 is another fin, and the rocket is another body. Also, the graphics here have been created using a number of the tools available in Flash, and I will show you how to use each of those tools in turn. So what we're going to do, we're going to go File, and we're going to create a new Flash document, Action Script 3. We'll leave the width and height and the background color. Again, you can change all of these yourself. You can make a black background and then put stars in it and so forth. We're just showing you at this stage the actual construction of the graphics and the guide layer. So I'm going to insert I'm going to start creating my rocket ship, and I'm going to use a polygon tool here. And in a polygon tool, if I go to the properties, you can see a number of options. You've got you can set the number of size to 5 or 6 or 3. I'm going to use a 3, so I'm going to start off with a triangle and then gradually change the shape of it. But I do want my triangle to have a nice linear gradient through it. So I'm going to choose a linear gradient from my colors palette. So click on my colors palette and choose a linear gradient. This one was, you'll get something like that in your linear gradients. It'll look something like that. So if I click on one of my colored icons, I can choose a color. I'll choose a blue, a kind of a dark blue, and I've got this white one here. Now if I did make my triangle like that, I would get that sort of effect, which is not quite what I want. I want to have something looking a bit different from that. So let's take that off, and let's go back to our colors. And if I move my white section to the center and hover over the color bar, I get a plus sign. When I click on that, that means I can add another color. Let's go and choose that. Let's just click on that white bar again, double click on that, and I've got my eyedropper. I'm going to go across and select the same color blue. Now I could choose a different color. It's not really majorly important, but I'm just trying to get some evenness in my image. Now I'm going to go back to my polygon star and draw my triangle and turn it around until I get the shape that I want. Now at this point I'm going to drag my triangle down a little bit, so I've just highlighted the whole triangle and dragged it down. But there's a couple of things I can do with this triangle. I'm going to use my selection tool, which is my black arrow, and go to the corners, and as I hover over the corner I get that black arrow with a square shape, which means I can move the corner. I'm going to move that corner down somewhere there. Yeah, we'll save it. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side and move it down there. And hopefully I've got some sort of an evenness about my rocket at this stage. I can move my center a little bit to that's a bit more centered, I think. And now if I go to my lines here, I can make them and drag them up and give a bit of a rocket shape to my lines. Do the same on the other side, and I have kind of a rocket shape. I can straighten these up a bit more and make it a bit more rocket-like, but I kind of like the little short stubby rocket. I could also, if I wanted to, drag that one down and give that sort of a bullety appearance. I might resize that whole thing as well, so just click on my transform tool, highlight it, just hold my shift button down and resize the whole thing. Holding the shift button keeps the image in proportion, and I'll click off. I want to make that actually make my whole rocket graphic, so I'm going to highlight it and hit my F8 key and save it as rocket. I'll save it as a graphic at this stage. I'll come back to the blast thing in a second. I could make the whole thing a movie, but for the moment we'll make that a graphic and go OK. I can delete that off my stage now, go to my library, and there's my rocket there. I'll double click on that rocket in my library now, and now I can work in a separate place and a separate set of layers. Let's do the fins. I'll call this I'll double click on this layer and call it body, and I'm going to create the fins. Again, I'm going to use my polygon star tool with 3 sides, and so I've got my polygon, but I want to go to polystar. I want to change my color to a different color. So I'm going to choose a solid color this time. I'm going to choose a red. Now you can make it any color you like, and I'll put this on a different spot within my layer. So I'm just going to go over here somewhere, and I'll show you why I'm doing this. It's a different way of doing things. There's my fin. I'll drag, if I go to the corner of that, I get that square shape again. I'll drag that up a bit, and I'm going to drag this one down and drag that one out a little bit, and then go to the edge of this one and get my round shape again and drag that one in, so I get a nice fin shape. So that should, fit over my rocket quite well. So I might make that a little bit smaller in a minute. Just hold my shift button down and resize that a little bit. That looks pretty good. What I want to do though is actually have 3 of those, and I'm going to make them pretty close to identical. So I'll highlight it, hold my Alt key down, and holding the Alt key down, drag my shape there, and also drag another one there. Now it's important at this stage that none of my objects touch. What I'm going to do is then distribute those objects to layers and put them in front and behind of the rocket ship. If I, again using my black arrow tool, click and drag and draw a large rectangle around, square around them, or rectangle around all of those fins. Now if I do a right click on those, I get a choice of distribute to layers down the bottom here, and watch what happens. Now they are in different layers. Layer 2, I'm going to call that fin 1. Layer 3, I'll call that fin 2. And layer 4, I'm going to call fin 3. So now I've got them in a different place. I can do things with them. I'll lock my body for the moment. So I'm going to lock my body layer. And let's get one of my fins. This one here, for example. I'll grab the whole fin. I need to make sure I've got all the lines, so I'm going to draw a triangle around it. I could make them objects or graphics, and I could have done that in the first place and put them into my library, but I was showing you some other techniques of distributing things to layers. I'm going to put that one there, and this one here I'm going to put on the other side. But before I do that, I'll go to modify, and I'm going to transform, and I'm going to flip it horizontal and then drag it behind my rocket here. Lovely, and that line, that dotted line, signifies I've lined the tops up. Let go, and then finally go back to my fin 1, draw across that one, and I'm going to, fin 3 I should say, I'm going to drag that one in front of the body and put it, say, over here. Now, the other thing I can do with that is change its shape a little bit. So I'm going to choose my free transform tool, or hit the Q key, and I'm going to, this time I'm not going to drag it in shape, I'm going to drag it in this way, so it gives the appearance of being in front of the rocket a bit, changes its shape, the angle a bit, and that's starting to look a bit more like a rocket, more like a bullet really, but that's okay. If I wanted to, I could go to my rocket shape and click on my thing there and drag that up a little bit and drag those out a little bit like that, and drag that one out a little bit like that, just different shapes, and I get sort of, yeah, that's a bit more rocket like I guess, but I'll take it back. I kind of like my short stubby rocket, make it a little bit taller maybe. There's my short stubby rocket, and again you can make it a bit stubbier if you like, just by clicking and dragging these out a little bit further, so you get not particularly even, but anyway, you can change the dynamics of the rocket, or the shape of the rocket, using some of these tools. So having done that, I'm pretty happy with my rocket, and I'm going to go back to my scene 1, and I have a rocket. I can use it multiple times. I'll delete that. Now, the next thing I'm going to make is my blast. I could have made them all one movie, but I've separated them because I wanted to show you how you can construct things by using it over multiple layers and so forth. Let's have a look at how to make the blast. I'm going to insert a new symbol. Now this time I'm going to call it blast. This time I'm not going to make a graphic, I'm going to make a movie clip, and I'll go OK, and we're straight away, we're into the movie clip. There's our movie there, blast, and we're ready to go. I am going to draw this by hand initially and then add the pieces using a couple of different tools. I'll start with drawing a line tool roughly through the center there. Doesn't really need to be, but if I click on it, my properties tell me that it's roughly at Y0, and that's good. That's a good place to be. It's exactly where I want that to be. Now I'll go back to my pencil tool. Now, using my pencil tool, I'm going to add onto this. Down the bottom here, under the pencil, you'll see, it's a bit hard to see, you can see you've got straighten, smooth and ink. I'm interested in smooth. I want to smooth out the lines of my pencil. So, starting where my line finishes, I'm going to draw my flames out. I'm not particularly good at these flames, but they'll do the job. Whoops. I might erase a bit of that. And do that one again. Just hopefully I don't latch onto that. Smooth out there and go back to just there. Lovely. And if I've done those correctly, I'll zoom back out and center that a little bit. If I've done that correctly, I should be able to fill that shape in. I'm going to choose a yellow color for my fill and go to my fill bucket and click, and voila, it's filled in a nice yellow color. Now let's get some more fill going. This time I'm going to use a brush tool, and what I'm going to do is just choose, I'm going to make my stroke 0, so it's a bit hard to see that on the side there, but on this stroke panel you'll see up in the top right corner you'll see a red line across a white square, so you'll choose that. So I'm saying no stroke. I've got a fill. I'm going to use my brush tool this time, and I'll choose an orangey colour. So from my palettes here I can choose sort of an orange colour. Doesn't really matter, you can choose whatever colour you like. And now I'm going to draw kind of out through my flames a little bit with my brush tool, and then fill that in. Just make sure I filled it all in properly. Get my brush tool to make sure I've filled in a few bits that I seem to have missed there, and I can also just sort of go like that and fill that in. And get my brush tool again. This time I'm going to fill it with a red colour, so I'll choose a red colour. You can choose whatever colours you want. Again, same thing. Draw your flames and fill them in, and now I have my flames ready to go. So now it comes time to animate it. I want you to go to frame 8 and hit the F6 key to make that 8. Actually, no, before we do that, we've got that blast. I'm going to turn that into a graphic. So highlight it all, hit my F8 key, call it blast, go OK. I'll blast one, and blast one. OK. And now my graphic is ready to go. And I go to I want you to go to frame 8, hit F6, and also we're going to put another keyframe at frame 4, so go to frame 4 and hit F6 again. That will create 2 points, start, middle, finish, and what we're going to do in the middle is resize our graphic. If I go to the properties of the graphic, I can see my Y position is -9.5. I'm going to remember that. I did go to -9.5 because I went above it in the creation point. Now, so being on frame 4, go to your free transform tool and click on it and drag it in to make the graphic smaller. Now, having done that, we've changed our graphics position of Y, so I'm double clicking on that and I'm going to type back in -9.5, which was my original position, and it puts it back up there so that the base remains constant. And now all I have to do is do a right click here, insert a classic tween, right click here, insert a classic tween, and I now have my flame going in and out. So back to scene 1. Now we're ready to put our flame onto our rocket. I want to double click my rocket, and now that went for 8 frames, that section. So before, what I want you to do is within your rocket, go to frame 8 on the first layer, hold the shift down and go to frame 8 on the last layer, and then hit F5, and that will keep the rocket constant right throughout that section. We're now going to create another layer called, I don't know, fire or something like that, doesn't really matter, and we'll put that at the bottom and go to the first layer, first frame of that layer, and drag in your animation, which was the last one. I think it was called blast 1. Going to drag that in, and in fact I'll resize it so it doesn't look completely out of place, and put it here roughly. So it's coming out of the bottom of the rocket, and it should now, and that it goes for the 8 frames, and it is essentially our fire happening out of the rocket. We could have made this all in one graphic, by the way, but it doesn't, all in one movie. But I'm showing you ways of combining them to create your things. There's no right and wrong way. Sometimes there's probably more efficient ways. Having done that though, now I've got a rocket with a flame. If I drag it onto my stage, I might resize that a little bit, holding the shift down, and click off, hold my shift enter. Oh, hello, nothing happening. That's not good. Why is it not working? That's not correct. Oh, it's blast, not blast 1. You silly man. Okay, go back to my rocket, double click on it, delete that, put in blast, which is the actual movie. I should probably rename that, but I'll drag my blast in to the first frame, go to there, move it up a bit, across a bit. Let's try that. Okay, go back to my scene, put my rocket in the scene, and get rid of that one there, put my new rocket in the scene, and we'll test that. Lovely. Well, that's what it should have been doing in the first place. So I think that's something to be wary of, really. I don't know why I did that, but anyway, I did. Okay, we've now got our rocket. So we've now got our rocket ready to go. I'll just rename that layer as rocket so that we know what we're doing there. And I'm going to make a new layer. It's going to be a guide layer. But I don't create just a new layer here. The easiest way is to do a right click here, and you'll see add classic motion guide. There are other ways of doing this, but we're going to add a classic motion guide at this point. And you can see it's created a thing called guide on this side here, a guide to the rocket. Now, for the moment, I'll just turn my rocket off. I don't really need it to be visible. And my guide layer, I'm going to get a pencil tool, and the guide has to be done essentially as a pencil or a brush. I'm going to use a pencil, and in here I'm going to do the smooth thing again, smooth out the outlines, and I'm just going to draw with my pencil. I'm going to draw up, down, up, and off the screen. That should do the job, and I'm going to do that over, say, 60 frames. So at frame 60, I'm going to hit frame 60 in my guide layer and hit F5, and that will create that line going right through those 60 frames. What I need to do with my rocket now, I'll turn it back on so it's visible, is I'm going to use my black arrow selection tool, is I'm going to attach it to my guide in a second at one point. Before I do that, I'm going to go to frame 60 and hit F6 and say that is the second place where the keyframe goes. I'm just going to make sure I can see all of that. Now, if I go back to my layer, my frame 1, my rocket, when I click on it, you can see there's a little circular shape right in the middle there. That is, I guess, like a latching tool. It's like the piece that grabs hold of the path if I drag my rocket across to the path, you can see it's turned a little bit smaller, and when I touch the path, you can see that small circle gets bold, and the rocket says, yeah, I'm happy with that, that's where I want to be. Now it's facing straight up, which is kind of where I want it to be. I'm going to go to my last layer, my last frame I should say, frame 60, and this time I'm going to say, my rocket, I want you to end up over here. I will do some things in a second with the rocket and change its shape, but the other thing, under properties at the top here, when you click on the first of all we better tell it to make a tween, so I'm going to right hand click inside the rocket, not inside the guide but inside the rockets layer, choose any frame inside that grey area there, do a right click and go create classic tween, and you can see that the rockets, you know, moved here halfway. And that's fine, but the trouble is now the rocket looks like it's going to stay pointing up the whole way. Well, there's a trick, there's a thing there. We can go over here in the properties. If you click on your rocket, click inside your tween, you'll see orient to path, and when I click on that, my rocket changes direction. Well, we can test this because we can actually refine it in a little bit in a second. Let's test what this looks like for the moment. Control Enter, and it's following the path. More or less, loses the plot a little bit. So we need to fix that up. So let's put it, let's choose some places. It's there, it's okay. There it's turning around. There. About there I think the rocket should be in a slightly different spot. So I'm going to do my transforming tool, click on my rocket, click in that space I should say, click on that frame, click on my rocket, and go to my transforming tool and highlight my rocket. No, where is it? I blocked that layer. I should be able to transform my rocket at that point. Yes, there it is. When I click on my rocket, and I can rotate it a little bit more like that. Choose another spot down here, for example. I think the rocket, if I click on it, click inside the actual frames, choose a point at which that looks okay. That's fine there. It's going the right way. Now that really is not the right spot. So here again, I'm going to choose my rocket, choose a frame, click on my. I might even insert a keyframe there, and just by hitting F6 and turn my rocket around a little bit so it's going the right way. That turns around much more effectively. Go up here. That looks pretty okay. Get to here. It really needs to be pointing down somewhere a bit more. So I'm going to hit F6 at the frame there and turn my rocket around a little bit more. And down here, get to the end. Again, I'm going to turn my rocket around a bit more and face that way. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, much better. So you set up the path, and then once you've got the path created, you can use keyframes and change the orientation. It will still try and continue to orient to the path, but it allows you to have a little bit more control within the actual guidelines that the guide that you've actually created, and you get a much nicer effect.